Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Good to be back with everybody today, and we're going to start off today's show with a little bit different format, a little bit different segment, something that we've been wanting to do for a while. We never really wanted to be a show that was kind of about news. We always wanted to focus on our guests and the interviews and helping people learn. But, we thought every once in a while it would be good to have maybe one topic that was in the news that was worth dissecting for just a couple of minutes, make sure people are aware of some of the big trends or some of the big news that's happening. So we're going to introduce this. We will come up with a good name for the segment as we go along. Right now, we're going to sort of just call it Cloud Clips, Cloud News, something along those lines. Send in your ideas if you have some. But we're going to use this as kind of a reason, again, to hit on maybe a big topic of the week, some big news of the week, maybe an announcement or something like that. Also gives us a chance to do some interesting things with sponsors of the show as well, and they always help us, get the show out to you and make the show interesting. So with that, today's Cloud Clip is going to be about the earnings announcements of both Amazon, which obviously is inclusive of AWS, and also Microsoft, which is inclusive of Azure, which both of those topics are very near and dear to a lot of listeners' hearts and interesting for people that listen to the show. So it was very interesting. Both Amazon and Microsoft announced their earnings. Microsoft blew out their numbers, had a really, really good earnings quarter. Amazon slightly missed their earnings. And you can read into that what you want. I'm going to put some things in the show notes about that. I think as we dig into both the Azure and AWS portions of it, that gets to be a little more interesting for all of us. The AWS numbers continue to be up. They are up about 40 to 46% year over year. So we continue to see growth in that space. Their operating margins were up at the highest levels they've been in 4 years. So we're seeing growth in AWS. It's a $22-25 billion a year business, growing at 40+% a year and over 30% margin. So it's a very it's a growing business. It's a growing large business, and it's a growing profitable business. Now, the headline that came out of this was we did see some slowing of the growth of AWS, which had some people surprised. But I think we've seen as the number around AWS revenue has grown, that number has slowed over time. It's just the kind of the nature of big numbers and the competitiveness that's going on in the marketplace. In contrast, we saw like I said, Microsoft growing. Microsoft grew quite a bit. Part of that, obviously, now is them absorbing the acquisitions of things like LinkedIn. The GitHub acquisition finally closed this past week. Now, the difference is that Microsoft does not exactly break out their Azure numbers. They did claim that Azure grew about 76% year over year. That is slightly less growth that they had last quarter. Like AWS, we've seen the growth rate of Azure kind of gradually slowing down over the last few years. Now, again, that number is getting to be larger. Speculation, because the number is not exactly broken out, is that Azure is doing roughly $7 billion a year, $7 billion a quarter. So, if you go by that number, some of the speculative numbers, because it's not broken out, it does potentially make Azure's cloud business slightly bigger than AWS's business. So, I think the takeaway from this is they're still growing businesses. They're still growing at very rapid rates, from a very large base. But I think we are seeing more and more competitiveness in the marketplace, whether it's between those two. Most likely it's from kind of the big six, from AWS, Azure, Google, from IBM, Oracle, and Alibaba. All of those continuing to be very aggressive about how they leverage their businesses, how they go after customers. So I think we're going to see more and more competitiveness for them. I think we will see growth from them. And I think we will likely see, in some cases, growth rates slowing down for the biggest ones as competition grows more and more. And that's not unusual for highly competitive markets and, companies that need to continue to grow and differentiate their product market. So wanted to kind of highlight that just for folks real quickly. something to kind of keep in mind as you're watching the public clouds. We always talk about it periodically, but we don't always dig into it enough. So hope you enjoyed this short kind of cloud take, cloud snippet news segment. And this week's segment is brought to you by a new sponsor. So we're excited to have a new sponsor this week. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog. A lot of you know Datadog. Datadog is a cloud scale monitoring and analytics platform, SaaS-based offering that's going to help you monitor everything in your environment. It was built to bring clarity to complex dynamic applications, whether they're in the cloud, whether they're on premises, in containers, wherever they run, right? They manage and monitor all of the sort of applications and technology that you really like today, containers, Kubernetes. They provide powerful dashboards. They give you seamless integration with more than 250 technologies. So you think about all the technologies that are out there in your environment today, Datadog can help you monitor them. They provide distributed request tracing for new modern applications, and they provide deep end-to-end visibility into the health and performance of modern applications. So as you're trying to visualize key metrics, as you're trying to set alerts around anomalies, you're trying to collaborate with your team to troubleshoot and fix issues, Datadog is going to be there to help you. And if you'd like to follow along, we will provide a link in the show notes. If you go ahead and set up your first Datadog dashboard and give it a trial for about 14 days, they will send you one of the best t-shirts in the industry, soft, beautiful purple t-shirt, the Datadog logo on it. Great shirt for yourself, great shirt for your kids, great shirt for doing anything that you do, whether it's work or being out in the yard. So thank you to Datadog for being a sponsor this week. Excited to have them on board with the show. And folks, with that, I'm going to hand this off to Aaron for our interview. Aaron's going to be interviewing Pam Selle, who is one of the engineers from IO Pipes, and she was recently at the All Things Open conference here in Raleigh. Aaron had a chance to sit down with her and talk about what's going on in the serverless world. So on to Aaron.
Okay, we're here at All Things Open 2018 in Raleigh, North Carolina with Pam. And I forgot, I made the cardinal mistake. I always like, hey, pronounce your last name so I don't mess it up.
Honestly, it doesn't offend me, though, because people, it just means they learn it by reading, but it's Selle. So Selle,
okay.
Not Sell.
So Pam Selle. Mm-hmm. And what we want to do is talk a little bit of state of serverless, mm-hmm. but it being All Things Open, talk about your presentation that you just did as well, which was standing room only. I mean, it was pretty crazy. So tell us real quick a little bit about yourself. And we've had IO Pipe on the podcast before, specifically with Adam. So give everyone a little background.
Yeah, I mean, and I know Adam was on last year, and so many big things have happened and for us and for serverless in the last year. So what I spoke about just earlier is looking at I kind of did just a general fireside chat of sorts about the state of serverless and what we've learned, kind of trying to, this is a great crowd, and you got all kinds of levels. So going all the way from, there's people in the crowd who this is the first they're hearing of serverless and just kind of trying to check it out. And then there's people in the crowd who are maintainers of OpenWhisk. And so trying to talk about a little bit of something for everybody. So talking about what the dogma wars are in serverless, yes. where the big fights are. It's like we're really nice people, so we don't fight that hard. And what the very common mistakes are, and what kinds of serverless workloads people run in production. So talking about all those kinds of things, just kind of very broad strokes of what's going on in the world of serverless.
So let's start with misconceptions, mm-hmm. because even in I was noticing in the abstract, you kind of had phrased it of, okay, we went from this AWS Lambda thing however many years ago to where we are in this industry now, and you mentioned OpenWhisk maintainers and so what are some of the common misconceptions you see out there right now with the industry?
I do think we're kind of hopefully on the long tail of people making there are still servers jokes. Hopefully that's the long tail. I think that it still remains a misconception of, there's a buzzword, and until people know what that means, that, it's serverless compute specifically is that we use the same word for a trend as we use for the compute platform. I think that's a core misconception, is that when we talk about serverless compute, we're talking about, say, AWS Lambda, Google Cloud Functions. We're talking about going from, from a VM to a container to a function sitting in storage. And when we talk about serverless as a trend, we're actually also talking about, say, farming out your auth to auth 0, or using a data store like Firebase or things like that, or using other cloud services. It's a paradigm as well as a compute platform. And so we use the same word to apply the both. And I think that it can be very confusing.
And also, if I could add too, like you mentioned a lot of products there, and a lot of people just associate serverless with Lambda.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and then you have serverless framework to boot, which I am a huge fan of serverless framework, but it does not help with the name game.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Absolutely. And well, that's kind of goes to the next thing then. What are some of the really big challenges? Mm-hmm. Once you get above and beyond the misconceptions, what are the big challenges facing the industry right now? Of course, with serverless or any other kind of budding industry, you're going to have a certain amount of growing pains.
Yeah.
Right? But what are the challenges as the dust kind of settles?
Yeah, I mean, I always think, especially, I love this about computing, is that our problems tend to be common and not new. Once you get, I'm very interested in computing history and how, the industry has evolved over time. And so what I'm seeing is serverless is running to good old distributed systems problems.
Fair enough.
So that's what I'm excited about, what I'm seeing people run into is that, because serverless, people get on it as a growth platform for good reason, is that, you have this platform that's theoretically going to flat scale for you. And I mean, what a blessing to a development team. So you can spend more time on your application logic and, your business logic rather than on operations, and just kind of shove that to the side while you're building your business. Like, what a way to, power your business. And so people are doing that, and then they're getting into, serverless at scale. And then, it's that software at scale problem where suddenly 1% of your workload is, that's actually a few thousand people. Once you get to that kind of scale. And so that's, having worked in some large scale distributed systems in the past, like seeing more people running into this as they grow, which is great for them. But it's like, I think it's like the positive is that these aren't new problems. The downside is that these are not solved problems. And so that's why this is, it continues to be a challenge in serverless compute and distributed systems in general.
Yeah, fair enough. And you've been at IO Pipe a little over 2 years?
Yeah, 2.5. I was a first hire, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So we
built it from the ground.
Yeah, I was going to say, so tell us a little bit about that journey specifically.
Yeah.
What are the challenges you personally have faced trying to build a business?
Yeah, I mean, we, and especially supporting our customers. And I find it so interesting because we get to support people. We build serverless ourselves, and then we support people building serverless and seeing them as they grow, supporting them as they grow, so that, so they can continue to run in production at the scale and reliability that they need to. And so, I'm trying to think of, I'm like, do I have a concrete story of a good one? It's like, I always think of like, what's the last production incident?
Great.
Right. When's the last time? It's like my last production incident was, it was once I was talking to my, one of my colleague, my wonderful colleague, who's the one who gets paged, and then calls me later if he needs help. But it comes down to, I think it's such a wonderful reminder, and I think that's why we're such big fans of dog fooding, and that running serverless workloads ourselves and seeing that. I ran into an issue, like luckily not customer facing, but like a system started misbehaving, and it kind of had a clock on it where, you get the alarm and you're like, okay, it was one of those alarms where you got to do something or you're going to have a bad time in about 24 hours.
Right.
You've been there, right?
Yep.
So you set the alarm and then you kind of have a clock to figure it out. And so I'm investigating and I'm using all the tools I have at my disposal, and I'm just like, wow, like, with we've talked about, internally, we talk about finding the needle in the invocation haystack. And it's you don't, outside of serverless, I don't think you have this discrete close-up view of what every single request on your system looks like that we do in serverless. And so using tooling to identify, what information can I get out of, and filter down from, like we had on this particular service, it had in a 15-minute rolling window, it had maybe like 1.5 million invocations. So like a pretty decent workload. And so filtering that noise down into something that actually gives me information about what's wrong in the system.
Sure.
So that I, doing application development can go in and that's honestly, that's the thing of like lessons of, these are the same things that our customers deal with is that, not to, it's like just such a, not to be too much, but that we, it comes down to the application developer. And that's the serverless world is that, it comes down to code because you've abstracted away so much else, that it comes down to saying, oh my gosh, there was a bug and it literally, it's a one-line change that fixes the thing. It took some observability work and, like making sure I could get more information out of the system to figure out where it was. But, it ends up being code at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's where your bugs are. And I feel like that's definitely a serverless story, compared to, luckily it's like compared to other distributed system stories where, tuning the Linux network settings, while very interesting, that was a rough 2 weeks.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And whereas like this production incident is like, oh, it took me it was intense, but it took a couple hours. It's not that bad.
Yep. So two trains of thought real quick. So, did you watch the new Battlestar Galactica?
Oh, I love Battlestar Galactica.
And so
gosh, where are you going with this?
You just reminded me of 33, the episode where it was like every 33 hours they set the clock.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like you just reminded me, it was one of my favorite episodes, and you just completely reminded me of 33. So
yes.
Sorry for everyone out there. That was a very
No. And the beauty is like, I don't know if you ever... we've had a couple times where we've had memory leaks in serverless, and one of the ways to save yourself during a memory leak is forcing a cold start.
Yep.
Because you can reset the memory.
Right.
So it's a way to continue to reset the clock.
So what are some of the kind of emerging tools, frameworks? What languages primarily are you seeing?
Yeah.
In folks that are implementing serverless, like what are some of the trends?
Oh, definitely. There's definitely some very fresh stuff. Like the stuff that I'm most interested in looking at right now. I'm very interested in learning more about Knative. So that's coming out of the Google team. I'm honestly not very schooled on it. I've been starting to watch talks on it. So that's something that I think is very worth checking out. I'm really into, my background is more JavaScript, and so I tend to write Node.js systems, but we are deploying a bit more Golang now because especially... if you have a latency sensitive system and you need to care about cold starts, I think people do care too much, which is, when a container is warmed up. The first time a code is loaded into a container is called a cold start, just for anyone to make sure they have the background. But the, running Golang, you're running a compiled system so that, say, one of the costs of running, say, Node.js is, it's a very fast runtime, but unpacking the node modules folder and loading in the libraries ends up having a decent cost. And that running something like Golang, that where it's going to compile your dependencies and dump anything that's not worth it, so it's going to shrink your package size, so it'll have a faster cold start and run just fast. And the unit of compute on Lambda is in time and compute. And so fast matters.
Yep.
And that's something I love about the platform, and I find it very interesting. And so we're actually caring about more performant code, and it's a needle that you can really, really see.
Yeah. And what is your thoughts on the other, like Azure Functions, Google Functions, OpenWhisk, like what about the other players in the environment that aren't Lambda? How much are you playing with them? How much are your customers playing with them? What kind of adoption are you seeing?
Yeah, they're definitely growing. And I think they will continue, especially, there's an honest and true industry thing where a lot of people can't run on AWS because they can't run on Amazon. I was talking to a grocery store. They can't run on AWS because of when Amazon bought Whole Foods.
Sure.
Like it's literally a competitive thing, and it's not personal. And so while at IOPipe, we are AWS only. We're a DevOps partner, and so we focus on the AWS platform. Definitely seeing more people being interested in other clouds, and we're all friends. It's more that AWS has the major market share, so that's what we focus on at IOPipe. But in general, we are trying to keep an eye on everybody else. I actually really love something I do like about Azure Functions has come a long way, and I do think that they're probably, I think they might be one of the more undervalued players in the space because that team has been putting in a lot of work, and I especially liked it. I saw a great talk they were at. The IOPipe team went to Serverless Days Seattle. So there's these, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with DevOps Days. There's now these Serverless Days conference. So people are organizing these community organized conferences. So we were at the Seattle one, and Azure was talking about, I think, I forget the name, but it's like they don't call... In AWS land, it's called the dead letter queue, but I loved that in Azure, they called it like the poison queue. It's just like the name. I was like,
Sure.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, right.
And in Azure, one of the things they do is it's automatically set up. And I feel like that's one of those things that, a lot of people come to serverless and they have these questions of like, what is the right way to do things? And kind of I think it's a weird question because one of the things is the point is supposed to be this should be a plug and play system. Like why you having that question is a problem.
Yeah, very fair enough. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so Azure comes with that, their poison thing. It's like, I'll look it up later. But they, that comes automatically configured because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Right.
And I love that they do that and they're thinking about the developer experience. So I think that they're definitely coming along.
And I would add too, full disclosure, they had the Cloudcast out. So we were out about a year ago, out to their headquarters and
nice.
Got the latest tech and
Yeah.
it was a cool preview. And then
Gosh, and even a year, a lot has changed.
Yeah, exactly. and it feels like forever ago.
know.
And then we went to Serverless Conference in Austin, and they did a bunch of talks there. And the big thing for me with them was the amount of interactions to all the different services. It was just so plug and play.
Yeah.
Like they were very ecosystem friendly. I felt like it was a big takeaway for me. So last question, what your talk today, any additional insights, anything that kind of came up today that was, with a crowd that big?
Yeah, I know.
Anything surprising?
A lot of great questions. Like, one of the things that it's like I'm definitely, I was like, I definitely got to make sure I put this in. But mentioning, I mentioned about loading into the runtime, and that was one of the questions because I thought I said to myself, wow, I really should I need to put that in the main content because it really is we do have an IOPipe article out. My colleague Stephanie wrote it about optimizing Java lambdas, and it's really interesting. And while specific to the Java ecosystem, it really she really honed down to the thing is, and especially for Java, you're bringing these libraries that are not meant to run, they aren't meant for a platform that cares about how big they are. They can be giant. And so in Java, talking about optimizing your Java lambdas and looking at that package size and just how, just the dent, the size of the dent that you make by dropping a dependency and saying, for our systems, I read a lot of source code. Like we read a lot of source code and say, does this actually have the things that we need? Because every dependency that we're pulling in is going to impact our package size, which that can be a real bad time when you run into that limit. that's just a hard and fast limit on these platforms is if your application package size and, forbid that you get in a space where you need to add it and you can't.
Sure.
And you're going to have a bad time. And so I think dependencies were one of the ones that was something that came up in questions that I think was very important and should be mentioned.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So, Pam, where can everyone else follow you, learn more about the talk, learn more about IOpipe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. So, if people are interested, I'm, probably easiest to find me on Twitter. My handle is Pamasaur, like a dinosaur. So, SAUR at the end. And on Twitter, IOpipe is IOpipes. So with an S on there, iopipe.com. I'll be on I'm on the latest episode of the Serverless Talk podcast. So that podcast is just getting spun up for people who are interested in a serverless podcast. And just definitely chat with me on the internet.
Fantastic. Pam, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.